right, seeing it is 7 p.m., I will call the May 30th, 2024 public hearing / business meeting of the Board of Education to order. If we could stand and salute the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invite one of our student representatives to read the land acknowledgement.
The West Irondequoit Central School District acknowledges the indigenous people of this region and that this school district building sits on the homelands of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is on these lands that we teach, learn, and live.
Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is the approval of said agenda. Dr. Johnson, are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
No changes tonight, thank you.
And have a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, seconded by Mrs. Borneball. Any questions or comments on the agenda? All those in favor? That is 7-0, Ms. Hester. That brings us to the public hearing on the Code of Conduct, and I will turn it over to Dr. Johnson.
Delightful. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kramer, but before I do, I just want to thank Ms. Kramer for all the work that she and our committee, which you'll disclose here in a moment, has invested in the process. You've really done a lot to make sure that that is a comprehensive process and that we have the right people at the table. So thank you, Ms. Kramer. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So tonight, for the public hearing of the Code of Conduct, I'll share with you the representation of the committee that reviewed it, our focus for this year, and a summary of the recommended revisions for our later approval from the Board of Education. In the board docs, you have the marked up version as I go through the PowerPoint with some of the key points tonight. So first, just to share, we had 26 committee participants that included faculty and staff from across the district, students from across the district, as well as community members and parents and guardians. So with our committee, we really focus, so tonight we are at the public hearing phase. So each year, New York State Education Law requires us to do a comprehensive Code of Conduct review and then have the public hearing and then approval from the Board of Education. So the comprehensive review took place with those 26 committee members. And as we looked at our code, we reminded ourselves of what a code of conduct needs to include as per outlined by New York State Education Law, which are those provisions regarding conduct, the provisions prohibiting harassment and bullying, provisions for safety inclusive of violence and weapons, and guidelines for disciplinary consequences, restorative interventions, and provisions for communication and professional development. So the committee charge is really for us to partner together to make sure, again, tied to also our district mission and core commitments, that comprehensive educational experience, and really to be focusing on, that welcoming environment where we're also nurturing learning. So as we reviewed, we ensured compliance with Section 2801 of the Education Law. We afforded our groups the opportunity to analyze the district's current code of conduct and provide that input, and we ensured equity for all of the membership in the district. So our why, what did we focus on as we're looking at our code of conduct, and our why is really our students, and that every student really deserves that adult that's a champion for them. We're not going to give up on them, so as we're learning and making mistakes, there's that key piece around being proactive, learning through those mistakes, but also clearly identifying what is expected so that there's clarity for everybody around that. I gotta remember to click. All right. So alignment to education law and Board of Education policy is also a piece that we look at the code through, along with our alignment to the district mission and core commitments. And then we also grounded ourselves through the New York State Culturally Responsive and Sustainable Framework. We continue to do work as we're looking at the code around our understanding the different biases and how can we look at what our bias is to make sure that our code isn't leaning towards one or a particular group of thinking, but that we're really making sure that it's in alignment and we're supporting everybody within our community code. So over the last few years, we've done a lot with the code to really make sure that restorative practices are highlighted as part of that teaching piece, part of that repairing harm, so that if when things happen, we're really making sure we're coming back together as a community and really restoring that peace and again, rebuilding that community. So again, as we looked at it through this year, we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of that continued lens through our work. And so with that, the committee took some time to review those characteristics of restorative practices, what is that relationship building, and really working towards that, that with, right? So we're teaching, there may be some consequences that are given there, but they're not just being done to somebody, but it becomes like a teaching piece and a part time to repair that harm, have those conversations and learn through that. And it really supports that reintegration and ensuring that all remain included and involved. So over the last couple of years, we've brought out the Children's Agenda study on solutions, not suspensions, and really looked at that study to make sure that we continue to keep that in the forefront as we learn from research to make sure that we're providing clarity through our code of conduct, but that we have lots in place prior to suspensions, but then we also have those pieces in place, especially around things that are governed by education law and really safety and security within our school building to ensure that learning is occurring at a high level. So this year, for the 24-25 school year, now I'll share some of the recommended revisions. So we really looked at the code to make sure that there was language that was updated that really emphasized sharing the code of conduct with students, like being more explicit with that, making sure that we don't lose sight of that, and then making sure that when we are sharing the code of conduct and using it as a teaching tool with students, we're doing that in a developmentally appropriate manner. So as we looked through that, we wanted to make sure that that was clear, and where it wasn't, where were there places that we could strengthen that within the code. We added a big section right at the beginning of the code that defines those key terms that were going to be used throughout the document. So there wouldn't be questions around some of the educational language jargon that we use. We're defining and using the word bullying, we're defining what that means, and it's really easy, it provides accessibility for people, which was also part of our work tied to New York State culturally responsive and sustaining framework. The general all persons part of the code, the title, we revised that title to match more of the wording and descriptions within that section to public conduct and visitors in school, so that when it was really clear who this applies to. And we also took the visitor section and we inserted that to clarify who constitutes a visitor on school property. So we use visitor once, throughout the code in different ways, but it wasn't really like defined or clarified. So in this section, we were able to do that with the revisions. The appropriate conduct section, we retitled it to prohibited conduct on school property, and that really provides clarity because that's the language that was used in the code and what that means. And so it makes things really clear to people about this is what we expect and this is what is not expected. And with that, it really we inserted a more comprehensive list of that conduct so that it's that clarity and consistency. So as students or visitors to our school may be moving from school to school, it just will add more alignment and consistency with that clarity. The dress code section, we moved that entire section to the student conduct section, and we inserted language to state that really the dress code will not be construed to limit the ability of students to dress and or groom themselves in a way that allows them to express their gender identity and to wear certain protective hairstyles, and really that's in accordance with the Crown Act. So we've done some work around the dress code the last couple of years, but we added more explicit language that really sets that apart, that while we have that, we're not going to be limiting students from The prohibited conduct section, we also revised to align to language in Ed Law Section 3214. So we added the definitions of possible offenses that are prohibited. So instead of just labeling them, we describe them with the definition. So again, that goes back to clarity. We included stronger or clearer language really around progressive discipline. So, our goal isn't to jump to the highest level of discipline. We are in the business of teaching and learning, and so we want to make sure that that comes through. So what are some of those pieces that have become more progressive, and how do you see that range of responses? So with that, you'll see revisions to the range of responses added to provide clarity. And again, that connects back to the progressive discipline. And we strengthen the definition of what time away is and really the length of time that would be. In our bus transportation and suspension from athletic and extracurricular participation, we added a subsection that was added to comply with, again, section 3214. And that language was added to clarify that students are not entitled to a hearing prior to such suspension, so that it wasn't confused with law and process around other types of suspensions. But we wanted to make sure that we provided that opportunity still for informal conference as to why. So as that's taking place, our families still have that opportunity. Under the provisions for removal and suspension, we strengthened the language regarding that process for removal. So we really focused on strengthening the process and clarity around that, focus on parent, guardian, caregiver notification, focus on the supports for students through that. So if we get to a sense where we have to remove a student and/or suspend, we still want to make sure that they are being supported, that learning is taking place, and that we have that communication and dialogue both with the student and the parent or guardian. Under suspension of schools, we provided clarity around reasons for suspension and that process for that short term, which is 5 or less days, and then we added language to the long term, which is more than 5 days, regarding process and rights, so that it's easily accessible right within the code. So for violent pupils, Commissioner's regulations does require a minimum suspension period to be specified in the code of conduct. So we added that language and specified that to reflect a minimum of 5 days, along with strengthening that understanding of what does it mean to be a violent pupil. And again, that's for clarity and tied to education law. The weapons section was revised to provide clarity and consistency around assigning discipline consequences, and again, that is directly connected to regulation. So as we looked at that and updated some things tied to regulation, because that was the second stage after the committee, is to make sure that we weren't missing any of those updated guidance documents. So re-engagement conferences, so once a student has been moved away from their learning environment for a suspension, and we know it's important prior to them coming back into the learning environment that we make sure that they have an opportunity to engage in a conference, a meeting, some teaching, to be ready to come back into that, to understand what their day is going to look like, feel supported, that they have everything that they need for the day. So we really added language to clarify who attends that, the purpose, and again, that's to ensure consistency and practice across buildings and grade levels. The section under criminal court complaints and juvenile delinquent petitions, this is again is tied to Commissioner's regulations, and so we inserted language regarding the PINS petitions that had been revised in previous years, but under continued guidance, really making sure that that is clear and in the code. For the Dignity for All Students Act, we revised here language around the DASA procedures for reporting discrimination and harassment and bullying. So it puts out there exactly what is that process, what are the procedures for that, so that people have an easy access to that and will know. And again, it's alignment of practice, it's alignment of process across buildings, and it makes that clarity. As I said, we had shared, we really wanted to make sure that throughout the code we are strengthening our communication channels, so that was part of that as well. Other revisions to the code is we've revised language throughout it to ensure that it's inclusive of all families. So you'll see language around parents, guardians, and caregivers in different areas throughout there to make sure that that was there. Again, the communication part comes with that, so that language is communication clear, so we make sure that we're being inclusive. And so those are our large changes to the code this year, and I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and a huge thank you to you and the entire committee for all the work that went into this. Questions, comments from the board?
I was actually going to chime in on that. You kicked off the committee meeting saying this was an off year with some minor revisions, and this was the result. I thought the engagement of the committee was phenomenal, so thank you for your leadership and facilitation of that. And just once again, I want to reiterate a huge thank you to our students. The student voice that we had in those meetings was astounding, and their insight and understanding of the process was unbelievable. Really appreciated it.
Thank you, Matt. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, it's great. I remember when I think we did it during COVID, and like we were part of like a code of conduct committee, and it was all through Zoom. And it was so funny, but it seems like forever ago. But it's great to see how far it's come and all the great things that have been accomplished. It's really amazing. I just wanted to, get more clarification on slide 19, like the dress code. So when it says inserted language to state. Okay, so I guess just clarification on that point, inserted language to state the dress code will not be construed to limit the ability of students to.
Yeah, so the language itself really provides clarity that, you cannot direct a student to dress in a manner that's gonna limit their ability to express their gender identity. Or hairstyles, so in other words, we're not gonna correct them because they might be wearing something that we don't think they should be wearing because somebody may think that they should be dressing a certain way based on a gender that they may want to decide, but it's really their own gender identity. So it's really not limiting them from being able to express themselves in a manner in which they.
Okay, I love it. I just wanted to make sure, because I know, especially for the Crown Act and different styles, I know especially in sports and stuff lately, there's been a lot of talk about that. But I noticed it says to wear certain protective hairstyles. It just seems a little limiting, because I know in the Crown Act it's more about, you can froze or locks or anything really that, is part of your identity as a person of color or whatever you identify as. So I don't know if we could make that more broad or just to refer to the Crown Act. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can look to see if there's a clearer way to say that. I think based on advisement from our attorney, protective hairstyles was the general term for all those,
okay.
but I could see where that may not be clear to somebody who hasn't had that discussion with
I
the
know, I'm
attorney.
sorry. Yeah, 'cause it's very limited. There's protective hairstyles, and there's a lot of different hairstyles that are under the Crown Act, so, yeah. It's awesome. That it's amazing.
Any other questions or comments? Anything from the audience, as this is a public hearing?
I'll just add one thing.
I just appreciate it, how much, all of you do for the school. I really appreciate it. I struggle with school, but hearing you all, so invested, really, really helps me. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was great.
I know.
I don't know if I could.
I was just gonna add on page 15 of the code, if we look at that specific language for what had been pointed out of the protective hairstyles, it does say including but not limited to braids, locks, and twists. So maybe that's an opportunity to, you know, if there's more that we want to say about that, or to wear their hair in a particular texture, or to discipline students for doing so. So I don't know if that captures
Yeah,
the
because
essence
then
of what
it's
you're
like,
thinking,
it's
but
kind of gets everything in there.
yeah.
I like that.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Last call. All right, seeing no further discussion, we will formally close the public hearing. Thank you again to Mrs. Kramer and the entire committee. That brings us to formal public comment, of which we have no one signed in tonight, but we do welcome the public at all of our meetings. And we're here every other Thursday, generally. That brings us to C2, approval of the minutes. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the minutes from the April 25th, 2024 meeting and the May 9th, 2024 public hearing and meeting be approved as presented.
May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Ms. Moore, seconded by Mr. Connor. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is 7-0. And that brings us to the good news. Friends, take it away.
More than 70 students from elementary grade through high school participated in the Launching Youth Leaders Conference in Nazareth. Our students, along with those from East Rochester and Williamson, showcased work in critical inquiry and advocacy projects. Students from Mrs. Porter's class at Dake Junior High and Mrs. Jennifer Gottfried's fourth graders at Iroquois also were featured on Channel 8. Senior Charles Victus was among 12 local students honored at the Rochester Police Department's Do the Right Thing Award ceremony in Rochester. Charles was nominated by his supervisor at the Adams Street Rec Center, where Charles is a lifeguard. He was honored for his dedication to the community and coworkers. The IHS Jazz Ensemble earned a third place finish in its division and silver medalist distinction at the Heritage Music Festival in New York City. The group was selected as Spirit Award winner for the entire festival. IHS senior Tejan Tejada was honored at the 29th annual Dr. Michael C. O'Loughlin Outstanding Senior Recognition Dinner. Tejan is president and a founder of the Black Student Union at IHS. He plans to enroll in the Army/National Guard. Senior Nicole Lamberson earned the Joe Junior Memorial Scholarship as the IHS Business Student of the Year, as selected by the Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce. West Irondequoit is one of the 23 districts statewide chosen to implement Plan Pilot, a performance-based learning assessment network. We are featured by WROC-TV Channel 8 for being selected. Sixth graders in Iroquois Middle School Student Council published a book called No Better Day as part of a national challenge program and dedicated to Iroquois teacher Mr. Joe Kuhn. He has popularized that phrase around school. Colt Victor, Amani Kapuya, Mary Grace Raj, Kieran Stenzel, and Jalen Strickland represented Dake Junior High School at a Section 5 Leadership Summit designed around team building activities they can bring back to our campus.
Thank you very much. Lots of exciting things happening. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, so I will start out by just acknowledging, I opened an email today, I don't know if the board saw it from, I think it was from NYSSBA, just alerting us to the bill that was recently passed by Assembly in the Senate, and is just awaiting the governor's approval, right? Requiring all schools and boards to have an ex officio student representative on the board. So first of all, I want to just recommend that as a district, we're ahead of the curve on that. And as evidenced tonight, Chloe, I really appreciate your comment and you speaking up. That was really fulfilling and heartwarming to hear, because having served as a principal in different capacities and a superintendent, you know, I very often schools will take that code of conduct and it's like it's an act of compliance every year, you know, to do that. And I think that under Ms. Kramer's leadership, I've really enjoyed watching that grow, and to see 26 people committed to that, interested first, and then committed and invested in making those changes. Really appreciate that. And that's for you folks. It's, you know, it's your school, so thank you. So on my first slide here, you'll see that we recently had celebrated Memorial Day, so thank you to the board again for the support with the additional day because of the mild winter and lack of emergencies.
Good stuff still.
They are emergency days, so, but I did have a number of compliments back from staff. They really appreciate that recognition and from students and families as well. And I wanted to just, you know, recognize all of the people that have died in service for us. And as part of that, we had students, 2 of our students partake in the memorial service at the town of Arundecoit there. So you can see Lucas DeSalvo, who's a really well-known student around the district, and Abby Myshak, who were able to perform taps. So I want to say thank you to them for serving in that capacity. So we're asking our customary question, and how are all the children? And the children continue to be well. So what you see here is Andrew had mentioned, lower left-hand corner, teacher Joe Kuhn, who was celebrated recently. That's pretty cool. You know, I got a little look at that book. You know, that's one of those things that I'm sure for him was just such a special moment and something that he'll treasure throughout his career. Had the pleasure of attending our boys lacrosse finals recently. So, and I point this out because they've had a fantastic season. We've had a really successful spring in athletics. But I was really impressed going there with just our student body, you know, and the way that they conducted themselves. They were kind enough to ask me that if they could still walk for graduation, if they charged the field, if you want. And I said, it's not me you have to be concerned about, it's all of the security guards. So graduation is the least of your worries. You know, just congratulations to all the teams across the board. And the boys, obviously, that was a heartbreaking loss, but really fun seasons to watch. I also point out this with the student body. So we have historically called them the Eagle's Nest. And it was pointed out recently by some of our staff. And this, I think, speaks to the work that we've been doing around cultural responsiveness in the district. And we had an event during the late winter in the gym, and they noticed the sign that we put up over the student section, the Eagle's Nest, and they said, you know, historically, that's something that could be very offensive to people, you know, around Nazi Germany. So we consulted our staff, and we did a little work around that. So we agreed that we're just going to have the nest. So I point that out because there's our nest, and we'll continue to describe them in that way. Upper left-hand corner, you see the Junior Achievement Young Women's Leadership Summit, which was really cool. So kudos to Luda Caesar for opening doors for our students and exposing them to that. Recently, we had an event there and got to see that. It's just a really special space. So it was cool to see many of our young ladies being able to attend that. And then the lower right-hand corner, the PTSA, huge supporter of the district. We're so blessed to have them at bat for our students, the annual Brookview Book Swap. So really just a cool event that supports literacy within the district. So thank you to them for all that they do for our students. Now for a few updates. So I just want to congratulate the board and thank your community for a successful vote in the additional annual maintenance capital project. So I know a lot went into that. We had some remarks that evening, so I just want to say thank you again. Had the pleasure of attending the Urban Suburban Awards ceremony in Nazareth University, and got the opportunity to kick that off as one of the co-chairs of the governance committee. It's just a phenomenal event, and numerous students were celebrated from every district, so I just wanted to recognize them. Too many to list. Mr. DeVeronica was saying he just got the pictures from that today, the names, so we'll get that up soon. I just want to congratulate them. Important part of our school community. A couple of RISE project updates. Don't want to steal any thunder from Mr. Brennan over there. So just, give me the look, Mr. Brennan, I do. Still awaiting SCD approval. We're getting closer. The playground equipment is on site, in storage, secure storage, and is ready to be installed when we get that approval. So if we remain on track, those will be ready to go for the fall for our students. And I know that a lot of families and students are really excited about that, so thank you for that. Did a great job of planning for the disruption to the libraries in the middle schools. So as of right now, Mr. Brennan and Mr. Conti, working with our strategic partners and librarians, people in the building, and the principals, they're going to be relocating those in those buildings and still making a collection of books available to our students. And I know for some members here at the table, it's very important to make sure that that's, there's some continuity to that. It's also forced some buildings to weed some of their supply spaces there. So that's really nice. And then we just really finalized different places across the district where the contractors will set up and store their materials. So everything seems to be on track with that. And then we're good to go Lakeview. So Mr. Brennan may report this. But I know we had suggested extending the lease up there for that tenant, and they recently contacted us and said that wasn't necessary. So we're going to be working with those folks at the end of June, and when we have approval, we'll move forward. A lot complimenting the, first, I skipped over the controversial issues and fundraising committee. So I shared with you in writing that I was, from the committee, and they delivered a recommendation back. That's been something that we've been talking about around this table for a few years, right? And so that committee was outstanding. We have one of the co-chairs here with us tonight, Ms. Kimberly Crystal. Do that with the appearance, Daniel. And it was really interesting to tag along with that committee as they researched that. They did a really thorough job of diving into the actual research, meeting with all the stakeholders involved, gathering all that, and then discussing it as a committee, and then making that recommendation, which I share with you. Along the way, I had the opportunity to sit down with the GSA about that, and today I had a follow-up meeting with one of those participants. And I share that because, it goes back to the student body in your investment, our student body at large, in the ownership of your space. And one of the things that we went through at length today was setting up a way where the leaders of our clubs and activities can come together at the beginning of the year and talk about parameters, and exchange ideas. I mean, they told me some things about some of the companies just financially. If that's the objective, there's clearly some advantages of certain companies over others, but also some concerns, and sharing those both ways and raising awareness. So that was just a great sit down. So I appreciate that with that person, the student. And then the final policy committee today. Woohoo! So Ms. Kramer, she's been jumping a lot of balls. That was a major one. That, again, as Board of Education set that goal, setting up a kind of a solid review structure. Got through 3 sections this year, which was amazing. Capped it off tonight with 20 minutes to spare. Awesome. So I just again want to thank you for the leadership and everybody that was part of that committee along the way. So with that, take questions or comments.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All right, Thank you very much for the update. Next is the report of the student representatives.
We visited South Lawn last Monday and heard very positive feedback from the kids. Each morning, South Lawn students meet with each other as a part of a tradition called morning meetings. During this time, they share information about themselves that the others may not have known before. As this Monday when we visited the school, the prompt of the day was, what did you do over the weekend? One third grader particularly enjoyed these morning meetings and said that it helps them get to learn more about each other every single day. The students feel extremely comfortable at South Lawn. They're going to school for the first time can be difficult, a kindergartner mentioned. When I met new friends, I didn't feel nervous anymore. Specials are popular as always, but PE was a hit among students in every grade level. They specifically enjoyed playing games with a huge parachute. At South Lawn, learning is fun. Kindergartners are learning the alphabet by dressing up or bringing specific items related to the letter of the day. We also saw a trend with math being a subject that students particularly liked. Beyond traditional learning, students have visited the Museum of Play and Helmer Nature Center on field trips. Good behavior is common and encouraged at South Lawn. One class even got to have a glow party for their composure. South Lawn is a good environment for all. I get to make friends every day, first grader commented. This concludes the South Lawn report. IHS students participated in the annual Friendship Walk for Best Buddies, an international non-profit organization. Both IHS and DAKE offer after-school clubs to promote these friendships. Team of Irondequoit raised more than $3,000, making us one of Western New York's top fundraising teams. IHS track and field crowned a pair of champions at the Section 5 Class A1, A2 championships. The 4x400 girls relay of all juniors. Aubrey Smith, Liliana Mendez, Alex Riddell, and Lizzie Tyler took first, and junior Luke Simon won the 1,600 meters. IHS senior lacrosse standout Jonah Carrier was named the Section B Class B Offensive Player of the Year. He is committed to Maryland. The Eagles went 15-4 and were Section B runner-up for the second time in 3 years.
Thank you very much. Who doesn't love the giant parachute? I have very fond memories. As always, you're more than welcome to stay. We completely understand if you would choose not to do that. And we will see you one more time this year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is the report of the treasurer, approval of financial statements and treasurer's report. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the April 30th, 2024 financial statements and treasurer's report be accepted as presented.
May I have a motion, please? Mrs. Cornwall, seconded by Mrs. Porter. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Yeah.
I just had a couple of highlights from the summary provided. Just kind of on the expenditure side, a debt service payment was made in April, about $790,000, and the remaining debt service payments for the fiscal year of May and June. And we received our final amount of our tax levy from Monroe County collected on our behalf. And then finally, we received about 91% of our revenues and expended about 73% of the budget. So we're in really good shape from a cash flow perspective to close out the school.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Was that a yes, John?
Yeah.
I had to look both ways.
Sorry.
That's 7-0.
Look at me,
Yeah. That brings us to business. And the first item was business. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, sir. I'll turn it right back over to Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, just real quick, this is for next week's meeting. We have our audit committee meeting ahead of the board meeting at 6 o'clock, and Jim Buffin will meet with us there to review his annual risk assessment. He's finalizing it now. He's making some last calls to various department heads to make sure he has all the information he needs to complete that assessment. And you'll have an opportunity to see a draft version of that, including any findings you may have, again at 6 o'clock next week.
Thank you very much. Any questions on it? Okay. That brings us to instruction, and the first item is end of year curriculum updates. Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, so it's my pleasure to hand the clicker over to Ms. Vega who will introduce some of our supporting cast.
So tonight, Dr. Marrero and Ms. Crystal have put together a presentation to really summarize all of the amazing work that they've been facilitating throughout the year in regards to curriculum. I mean, the depth and breadth at which they have engaged teacher teams to build curriculum, revise it, write it, all in alignment with, you know, our district core commitments and values and our single point rubric, which is driven towards culturally responsive education. It's just pretty phenomenal. So, you know, I'm just happy today to have them here to showcase not only their good work, but the work of so many teachers who have participated in this as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Diane Orlando.
See how far it is now?
I know, it's good to be
I did that on purpose.
That's right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We're excited to share all the amazing work that's been going on in the district with regard to curriculum and instruction for STEAM and humanities. So we wanted to start off tonight by talking a little bit about some of the work that we've supported across, what was this? Humanistem. I think that was Mr. Metra's point, right? So we first wanted to start off by highlighting some of the work that we engage with through the DEI Coalition with our amazing committee. I mean, really, it was one of the most fun committees we've ever worked with. So many stakeholders from across different areas in our community and district. And we were really coming around the question, how can we increase equitable opportunities for students to gain access to and find success in rigorous and or advanced educational experiences? So we really, what emerged very organically were two phases of our work. The first really circled around analyzing data from selected core classes across grades 8 through 12, which is really where our advancement begins. And we really wanted to confirm some of the suspicions that we had around who was accessing those courses and were there any inequities across different subgroups. What we learned was that inequities did exist, and that it wasn't just about access, but it was also about performance once they were in those classes, which led us to the second phase of what was causing gaps in performance. So then we analyzed more data. We wanted to make sure that Kelly Sanfora didn't feel left out, so we included her a lot in this work. So thanks to her and her team for keeping us outfitted with all of our fun requests. We learned that students, you know, we really needed to pay more attention. How are we ensuring that students, as they transition from 6th grade into DAKE and then into the high school, are getting the supports they need to be strong students in challenging coursework and advanced courses. And so we identified a problem of practice that if students from historically marginalized groups are not finding academic success in the advanced courses they access, there are gaps in intervention and support structures for these courses. And so we as a committee continue to do some work and research to articulate some recommendations that we're going to be bringing forward to our curriculum instruction team and beyond. And so I won't read them all here, but these were the 4 steps that we articulated for us to implement starting this work this summer. Really putting a high emphasis on that first one being what do students have to say and how can we make sure their voice continues to be front and center in this work.
So continuing our work through DataWise, it's part of our larger focus question on how are all the children. Last year we engaged in instructional teams on the DataWise process to analyze student performance data and use that to drive instructional decisions. If you're not familiar with DataWise, sort of just to give you a mini quick refresher, essentially at the beginning of the process you organize your data, you look for patterns, and then you connect those patterns to your teacher practice, and you define a problem practice related to something that you do as a teacher that may have impacted the results that we got. And so teams, based on what they saw in the data, came up with a series of problem practices just like we did for our DEI committee as part of the Inquire process. So And we pushed our teams even further than we did last year, because last year their problems of practice were solely focused on sort of big picture, how did our kids do on certain ideas and concepts, but we really wanted them to push and take a look at how our students in our subgroups were doing relative to performance, because it's easy to say if I got an 85% passing rate, then my kids are doing great, but there might be students in certain subgroups that do not reflect that overall performance. So there are two examples there, one that is content-based from the Earth Science team that had to do with like vocabulary instruction. Students may have struggled to make sense of certain higher level vocabulary in that class. But then there's an example here from one of our math classes, teachers who noticed a significant difference in how our students, our E&L students were performing in particular skills. And so they defined one of their problems of practice around that particular subgroup. Based on those problems of practices then, our teams moved to the ACT portion of the DataWise process, in which you essentially make a plan for implementation of a particular strategy or a shift in your teaching that you think will have an impact on that problem of practice. And your plan also includes the ways in which you're going to assess the effectiveness of that strategy or the effectiveness of that shift, how you will analyze that data, and then what you're going to do right after. So the process kind of repeats itself. Start with a new fresh set of data, and act from there. And so there's one example here from the social studies, one of the high school social studies teams, in which they chose specifically modeling mini lessons and peer review protocols as part of their regular practice. So this is just an example of how they plan to implement that, assess it, check their data, see what that did to their problem practice.
The third element we wanted to bring to you tonight was a component of our refreshed curriculum implementation regulation, where we ensured that in addition to garnering feedback from our teachers around new curriculum and how we can revise and strengthen, we wanted to make sure that our student voices was also included in that process. So actually just last week, I think, we sent the surveys out to our teams that are implementing either new curriculum that has already gone through the approval process and we're looking to prepare for final revisions this summer, or teams that are piloting new curriculum that will help us determine what our next steps need to be. So this is not to all students, just to students in those particular courses. And we're really looking to gather information from students on these elements that we can then bring to our teams this summer to think about both what are the curriculum revisions we would like to make, and then also what are some of the instructional implications. For example, I was nosy and previewing some of them, and students were saying how much they really enjoyed engaging in one of the narrative fiction writing tasks in one of the humanities units, and it came up over and over again, so that's going to be a big celebration for the team for sure. So we're excited about this process and what will come from it to make sure our student voice is really deeply embedded in our curriculum.
All right, STEAM-specific curriculum work that's been going on. So I just wanted to highlight that, so this is just, what you're going to hear is a very small sliver of a vast amount of curricular work that has been happening since I got here, that is ongoing. And so this is just a list of course-wise and content area-wise, the curriculum writing just that has been happening across the year, starting when I got here. There is the inclusion now of the art department, and the music department has jumped in as well. It has taken some work to make that happen, but they are on board, they're experiencing some success, and they're really into it, which is great. And there's also, coming soon, which you'll hear about in our next board meeting, some work happening with our self-contained classes at the high school for science and math curriculum writing that meets their needs as well. So lots going on. I can't cover all of these because, you guys will be bored. One major undertaking that we had this year, this is our first year of implementing the New York State required investigations for science at 3 through 8. this is a year of like really heavy lifting in terms of just getting all of those investigations integrated into the curriculum and run successfully. You'll notice in the slide that I highlighted 5th and 8th grade. They had a particularly difficult task this year because, as I mentioned before, New York State asked us to implement all of these investigations this year, even though they're meant to be stretched out over multiple years, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th. And our students were going to be tested on all 4 of these investigations this year on the first year. So we had to make sure that our students had those experiences this year. Our 5th and 8th grade teams powered through this. This was a significant amount of instructional time. We're talking about a month's worth of instructional time to implement all 4 investigations at each grade level. They made significant changes and modifications to the curriculum in order to be able to cover everything that they need to cover and get our kids prepared. Massive shout out to our K through 6 teacher leaders and TOSAs, Christine Riesenberger in particular at the 5th grade level, who did a tremendous amount of work in managing materials, providing professional learning. Literally, this picture at the bottom here is from Nadine Avalon, literally running this investigation with one of our classes. She's one of our TOSAs, and she helped make that happen for that particular teacher that needed help. Massive undertaking, super proud of the work that we did, and next year we can breathe and go back to normal, and our 5th graders will do 2 investigations, our 4th graders will do 1, our 3rd graders will do 3, similar structure at the middle school level, 6 through 8, or junior high level.
Orlando, can I jump in there?
Yeah.
I do want to bring these investigations and the new assessments just a little bit to the board's attention, because this was our first year through it. It was a new New York State mandated curricular item, and I want to kind of bring to light that just some of the difficulties around this particular mandate, as you often advocate for us in different settings. It, as Orlando described, it was a real heavy lift to make sure that all of these were implemented during the school year. And one of the things that I'm not sure was completely thought through at the rollout of these, so even next year when things will be a little bit more spread out, one of the things that hasn't really been addressed yet through the state and some of their guidance is, so for example, if you get a new entrant in 5th grade who is from out of state, for example, they will then have to engage in all of these investigations during that 5th grade year as they're transitioning in. I think we had an example of that this year where we had a new student who came to us. I don't know if they were out of state or not, could have just even been from a different district, but they had to do like all of the investigations before they take the test. And just if you put yourself in the shoes of that student, that okay, now I'm new, I don't know anyone, and now I'm pulled because I have to go through all of these different investigations. It's been an interesting experience. It is a newer curricular mandate, one which of course has been unfunded, even though there was all of the materials and supplies to purchase for these kits and to implement. So it's just something I wanted to bring to your attention. There is right now a survey out to districts around the assessment and the investigations themselves, so we're completing that to provide our feedback. But this was something that I know I'm going to keep on my radar as appreciative we are of the shifts, because it's really rigorous instruction. I see Orlando's face because the tests were dense. It also, though, you also have to measure that impact on student learning, and sometimes those hoops you have to jump to meet the mandate, but is it best for kids? So that's just something I wanted to bring to everybody's attention.
And the test was moved a month earlier than it normally is for both 5th and 8th grade, so consider that there was almost 2 months worth of instruction that they normally are able to provide for those content areas that, they really had to tighten up. So hopefully, and there are more investigations coming for living environment and for earth science at the high school. It won't be, I don't think it'll be as intense a process just because it's the one class and they already have lab requirements, but still, we have a lot to do and a lot to learn. All right, As part of our work, as you're aware, we don't necessarily have dedicated health teachers at the elementary school level, so a lot of the work related to teaching the health standards is carried by the science team. We actually had an opportunity to put some teams together to really go back and examine the health standards at the elementary school level and really distribute their responsibilities as who, like really making it real clear who's responsible for teaching what. Some of those things were lost during, the COVID years where we really had to focus on very particular content. So from that, we have really clear guidance on what happens specifically at K through 6, with even more emphasis on what happens at 5, 6, because there are very specific lessons that need to be happening at that grade level. So I think I've mentioned this before at this forum as well, but I wanted to bring it back to our attention. We have revamped, redesigned lessons on puberty, drugs and alcohol, and something that we had, as I understand it, never done before, we're going to do for the first time this year, is firearm safety. We've done this in collaboration with IPD and a whole bunch of stakeholders in our district. Our substance abuse counselor is involved, nursing staff is going to be delivering some lessons. Actually, it's not listed here, but on diabetes as well. And our Assistant Director of Counseling, Student Equity and Wellness, Leah Daniels-Farron, was also crucial in implementing this. We're actually getting a curricular resource that we're going to be able to use to continue to develop these lessons further called Too Good for Drugs, which is a really strong resource that we're getting through some of the settlement funds that we got from Jewel. So some of the lessons will be designed using that resource as well. Another area that we don't get to talk about as often is our sort of beefed up collaboration with Helmer. In the past, Helmer has had their own programs and we kind of just go visit and go through their programs. Over time, like we collected some feedback from teachers on how those experiences were going, and we realized that there was room for improvement in sort of like better alignment between those experiences and what's in the curriculum and meeting our standards. So we have a really strong relationship now where our teachers and the Helmer nature folks kind of get together with our TOSAs to co-develop what students do at the field trips. And that led to really a much stronger version of our water quality study that they do, for example, and really cool experiences related to the eclipse. Our teachers were really hungry for having the Helmer Nature folks coming in and do like small assemblies for our students, which developed into this whole thing where they went multiple times to East School and even gathered some reflections from our kids. This is just like a little example of a really funny thing that a student put together. I'll let you guys look at it more carefully. It was really hard to pick. There were like a ton that were really funny. Yeah, I think we all experienced that same feeling. Oh my gosh, it's dark. So anyway, I thought that was a cute example. And then lastly, I want to bring us back to our first year of implementation of iReady Classroom Mathematics. As you might remember, we're in a transitional year where while the majority of our teachers were engaging in the use of this resource, we did allow them to kind of take their time, go through their training, and make a decision as to when in the school year they wanted to start implementing it fully. At this point of the year, everybody is doing it by now. They're ending, if they didn't start, they're ending the school year with it. And by the start of the next school year, 100% of teachers will be starting in September. We managed to, through some huge collaboration, and shout out to the school principals who had to manage me pulling a bunch of teachers at a time from their buildings, and they were asking me, what the heck are you doing to me? How am I supposed to cover all this? And yet, not a single school closed because of us. So they survived. They don't want to hear me say that, but they did it. And so just about everybody is trained. We have a really strong sort of structure of implementation. We've been getting some really positive feedback from teachers. There's 2 examples there. There is some work to be done curricularly to adjust, right? It's our first year doing it, but things I think are going really well. That's it for STEAM.
Humanities. All right, so we're going to start off by picking up where I may have left off with you last, talking about our literacy instruction. our implementation of ensuring that our science of reading research is deeply ingrained in all of our classroom instruction, K-6, as it pertains to reading instruction and writing instruction. This visual here, aside from being a reflection of my very productive attention to detail and colors, is really meant to display the alignment between what's called the simple view of reading, which is the equation across the top that articulates the essential components of word recognition or decoding, language comprehension, like vocabulary and listening comprehension, and how those two together are essential for building strong reading comprehension. What was exciting now that we're on this side of this work is seeing how the balance between these components have come to life in the way that our curriculum design has come out. So you'll notice at K1, for instance, the focus is on foundational literacy, which is informed from our CKLA resource, and language and listening comprehension, which is informed by our humanities curriculum, which is written in district. And then as you go up the grade levels, you'll see how those components shift in balance, reflecting students' strength in decoding, for example, being able to actually read words on a page, and then ensuring that that language comprehension, that vocabulary, all of those essential components around understanding, listening, and reading language is being developed as well. And then the humanities units, as I've shared with you in the past, are really there to, in the K4 realm, to serve as that application space in novel studies and social studies and writing tasks and those kinds of things. And at the 5th and 6th grade level, we're really seeing that all come together and come to fruition to prepare our students to enter DAKE. I did want to spend an extra minute or two just talking about our year 1 implementation of CKLA at grades 3 and 4. So at grades 3 and 4, CKLA includes the language comprehension part, which is a difference from the K2 CKLA program adoption. And the humanities units really still continue to serve as that authentic experience adoption. What I wanted to point out was some of the creativity of our teachers as they really dug into this curriculum and made it their own. They went through the curriculum, which is very comprehensive, and identified ways to make it responsive to their students' needs, to make it efficient for our classroom structures, and to identify opportunities to really bring student voice into these experiences. So what you'll see here are some examples of some experiences our teachers built that were not a part of CKLA but directly connected to it. So in this is our poetry unit for grade 4, unit 3. The students put together an amazing poetry reading that we were invited to. It was so cute. And what they did, all of the poems that they read through CKLA were preceded by an author's biography. And so since they're not authors, they also wrote their own biographies. So that's sort of what you're looking at right here. So it was amazing to see that stuff come to life and to see teachers making real connections, you know, helping their students make connections to a brand new resource, but also helping our students transfer the skills they're learning in you know, texts that are selected specifically for the skills that they're learning in CKLA, and then transfer it into novels and transfer it into their informational texts and social studies and things like that. So more to come for sure, but definitely an encouraging first year, and we're all feeling really excited to have the tools we need to ensure science of reading is happening in every single classroom and informing instruction for all of our students. At the 7-12 level, we've been continuing our curriculum work in earnest, in addition to building our teachers' skills around vocabulary instruction, teaching grammar and syntax, and writing, which might not sound exciting, but it is. Teachers really have found ways to make vocabulary instruction meaningful, fun, and powerful for all of our students. In addition to all of the sort of nuts and bolts of language comprehension, which really dominates the foundation of our 7-12 English program, we've also been seeking to strike the best balance to ensure students are engaging in texts that both reflect some of our more classic literature and our more modern literature, making sure students have exposure to diverse perspectives, identities, experiences, and voices. And this is just a selection of some of the texts that our students are engaging with across grades 7 through 12. We're also building literature circle units in every single grade level, starting in grade 5, so that students really have opportunity to have choice in what they read and how they apply the skills they're learning in a rigorous and comprehensive way. And those literature circles are great for fostering those student connections and collaboration as well. We continue to partner with our library department to foster independent reading and getting our kids excited to read on their own and develop their identities as readers. And as well, students continue to find ways to use their voice through writing in authentic and meaningful experiences. Similar to what Orlando had mentioned around 1511 at the high school, we're also taking a look at the Humanities 1511 program with a real expressed goal of making sure that all of our students in those classes are having the skill instruction they need around literacy, as well as the instruction they need around grade level standards. A lot of our students who come into the 1511 program are in need of some explicit literacy instruction because they're not yet able to independently access grade level text. So that is a really important part of the 1511 program, but it cannot come at the expense of engaging in novel studies, engaging in writing tasks, engaging in social studies, engaging in all of those rich components in civic literacy. So this is a sort of map of the work that we're seeking to craft. Language Live is a program we've been working to implement over the last couple of years. It's informed by Science of Reading. It is developed specifically for students in grades 7 through 12 who are not reading on grade level, which is what makes it so powerful because it's engaging students who are maybe reading at a 3rd grade level in a text that's designed for an adolescent. So it's engaging, it's powerful, and there's some opportunities for independent work as well as teacher-guided instruction. That is being paired at the 7-10 level with novel studies. We're hoping to explore opportunities for literature circles even, and independent reading as well. And then in our social studies lens, we are using social studies as a way to really build their background knowledge, explore another opportunity to build vocabulary, to practice writing and engage in informational text. And one of the most exciting components, I'm not clicking along, oh gosh. I worked so hard to make all these pretty slides. So what you're seeing here are just a balance of like how we can ensure that students are getting the remediation instruction that they need for their literacy, balanced with grade level text that their peers are engaging with in gen ed classrooms. We also, we also wanted to make sure that the civic literacy is front and center in this learning for 2 main reasons. One, every single person who leaves this district ought to be prepared to be civically literate and prepared to engage as an informed community member upon graduation. Additionally, New York State has created a seal of civic literacy, which, if earned, can exempt you from one of the 2 required social studies Regents exams. The way that they designed this program is to make it accessible for all students. And so our 1511 teacher was all about partnering and figuring out a way to make these experiences essential for her students. And this year I'm excited to share we have 3 students in our 1511 program who just recently completed their requirements for the seal of civic readiness. So yay, so proud of them. We went and saw their presentations last week. It was awesome, and more to come with that, but all of that is really coming together to help our students. They had to do a presentation to us and Amy Donk, and they did it. They did great. So we were really proud of them and excited to see how this grows. Our library work continues as well. When Dr. Johnson mentioned reading and to accommodate our library, I thought you were going to talk about the books we're getting rid of. We weren't, but we are also using it as an opportunity to continue that process that we started a couple of years ago to make space for new, diverse texts that are really relevant to our student body. Our library department worked really hard this year to build an action plan for the next couple of years aligned to a whole slew of standards. So we looked at the New York State Library Program rubric, the New York State Cultural Responsive and Sustaining Framework, the ISTE standards, the Computer Science and Digital Literacy Fluency standards, as well as our core curriculum, to identify what our district needs from our library department and how they can really emerge as leaders in their buildings. So our K-6 staff has engaged in curriculum development aligned to all of these standards, supporting typing instruction, as well as supporting the celebration of our Heritage and Identity Months, and all the beautiful components that come from library instruction is built into the pacing guides that we've drafted, and we'll be starting that curriculum work this summer. We've also looked at ways to use our library spaces for student voice. For example, our high school librarian gave a survey to our high school students to share what they want their library to look like, and we'll be using that data to inform future work. We've engaged in professional development around book study groups during lunches and all those kinds of things that our library, they're so excited to get involved with. They're also engaging in some professional learning to continue their development of understanding how to use instructional technology so that they can be a resource both for students and teachers alike, and are excited to continue to build themselves up in those roles over the coming year. Lastly, our Family and Consumer Science course, or FACS at Dake, we have continued to, or began our work to review the curriculum for that course and ensure its alignment to the culturally responsive and sustaining framework. This is just an example of some of the work that we've done to make sure that our students really do have the essential life skills to be independent as they prepare for high school, but to make sure we're doing so in a way that is inclusive of all identities, all family, home life, and all different kinds of lifestyles. So more work to come for sure, but this is just the beginning of some really exciting stuff. Okay, so in addition to all that work, we have some really cool projects starting this summer. One is we will begin exploring what financial literacy instruction can look like, and we're going to begin that work by doing some crosswalking between our economic standards that come through the social studies framework and our career and financial management work, which are aligned through some of the New York State standards for financial literacy. And then from there we'll be bringing more to you next year. As mentioned, we are one of the 23 districts approved for the planned pilot. I just went to their orientation yesterday. It was fantastic. So excited for the learning that we're going to be engaging with for that work. Basically, the core of the work is to identify opportunities for project-based learning and assessment built into a core content area. We are in cohort B, which is all about inquiry-based instruction and learner profile, aligned to the Blue Ribbon Commission work profile for a graduate. So it's really tightly aligned to the work that we're doing in district, and the teachers are pumped. They can't wait to get started. So we'll be just beginning that work this summer. The state will be providing some of our leaderships and professional development, and then we'll be able to provide that professional development to our team, and lots more to come on that. And then finally, we'll be continuing to look at our self-contained curriculum K-12 to ensure that we're striking that best balance for our students, making sure they're getting the instruction they need to support their foundational skills, as well as to pique their curiosity and strengthen their interest as learners. Any questions for us? We are happy to.
I have a couple.
Okay.
I loved, first of all, thank you so much. Your excitement and your enthusiasm about curriculum is amazing, and it makes us excited as the board to hear it, so I appreciate that. Student voice, I love that student voice is forefront in what you do. The surveys that you send out to students, how are students completing them, percentage, are you getting feedback?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a ton in there already.
Yeah.
Okay. So teachers have through the end of the school year to complete them, depending on the grade level band. We did set parameters to make a grade level, age appropriate the way we collect the feedback. So at the youngest grades, the teacher is having conversations with the students as a whole group and collecting their
Got it,
feedback
okay.
and inputting one form for their classroom. At the upper grade levels though, I think we started at 4th grade,
Yeah.
4th through 12. Students are individually filling out the survey. And giving us their impression, their ideas about the curriculum. And we have a ton of responses
Yeah.
already.
Great,
We
great.
did ask teachers to designate class time.
I was
So
wondering
all
that, yeah.
students in those classes will have time in class to complete it.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Yep.
And my second question, about the investigations.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was mandated from the state, but not funded.
Correct.
So, all of the equipment that we saw, how did you do that? Where did it come from?
From our budget.
From our curriculum and instruction.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, I
But
think
you weren't planning on that because,
well, it's, as the information came, as soon as we had information about the cost, so there was a couple vendors that we could have gone through to get these materials. We chose to partner with BOCES because we work with them already.
right,
And we get we get some, financially, it's just advantageous for us to go through BOCES. So we worked with them, we made a very large order that was not cheap. And also it was such high volume that it was hard for them to deliver on time. So that created another major challenge for us that we were, that we had to deal with. How do we implement this as these things are coming, months later than they're supposed to, because everybody's ordering at the same time.
Right,
So there were shortages everywhere.
hopefully that will be better next year where it's a little spread out.
Yes, and we won't, a lot of these things were one-time purchases, and so for some of these, we just have to replenish some consumables. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple of questions too. It's great, I love one of my kids is all about STEAM and the other one's all about humanities. They have the best of both worlds at home.
Balanced home.
Yes, that's right. Well-rounded household. But I was a little concerned about the data-wise information you got from the STEAM about the L's in terms of the math and science, I guess, vocabulary, I guess that like high academic language. Is there any way, like what, I noticed that, what you're doing to kind of act on that, and get that kind of resolved or intervened on. But is there any way, like being an L myself, I just know that a lot of times our students have, this vocabulary in their primary language, but they don't in the second language that they're still acquiring. Like, I just wonder if there's a way to work with those ENL teachers to like kind of bridge that vocabulary gap, especially in math and science, which is, I don't know, you would think like a higher interest, areas for our L's for sure.
Yeah, and our ENL students are just one example of the disparities that teachers found, because that was the point of putting them through this exercise. It's like you have analyzed your data before, but you might not have been asked in a while to look at your data through the lens of, disaggregated, like how are your students of different, subgroups doing? And how does your instruction impact their performance in these courses? It also ties back to the conversation in our DEI committee about students having access to higher level coursework, right? Yes, more work to be done, particularly with, Kim and I have been talking a lot about the need for stronger reading and literacy instruction in the science courses in particular, especially I think teachers got, a rude awakening, I think, especially with that 5th and 8th grade exam, that really put to the forefront the need for putting tasks in front of students that ask them to think at that level, to analyze text at that level. There's no escaping it. I think it has to happen. So,
And in the humanities, we found similar data with our ENL students as well. Vocabulary for our L's came up in US history and a few of our English classes. So as part of that work, we dove deep into vocabulary instruction in the humanities this year. The last 2 department meetings of the year we dedicated for our grades 5 through 8 humanities, social studies, and ELA teachers, as well as our entire K-12 ENL staff around how do we teach vocabulary for all students. We put together in conjunction with our 5-6 humanities TOSA Claire Hamilton and our team, we put together a vocabulary instructional handbook that will be a really important resource moving forward to support the data that came out of this, the data-wise work. And then, as Orlinda mentioned, we're definitely talking about how we can bring the humanities team together for some vocabulary PD because we all work with big words in our courses, and it's hard to teach big words. So we're really digging deep. Our ENL teachers did just finish their letters training. Sorry, it has So that work was started under Tristan Nicolo, our former literacy coach, and then we finished it through BOCES. So they've just finished that work, which will really support the way our L students are learning complex language and vocabulary. So hopefully we'll start to see the needle move in those areas.
That's great.
Any other questions? I was just looking at the New York list of unfunded mandates, which currently, as I scroll to the bottom, has 281 items on it that we advocate for. So I will cross-reference this and make sure that this is on the list. But thank you so much to both of you for everything that you do, but also for this presentation to keep us informed. Orlando, you'll just have to try harder next year if you want to force a building closure.
Trying really hard.
Really hard. I
And
still
now
have
that-
3 days of PD.
And now they're ready for
Stay
you.
tuned.
too, so they know.
Challenge extended.
Thank you so much. If there's no other questions. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the professional learning plan updates. Dr. Johnson.
Sir, so we'll kick it right back over to curriculum instruction. Ms. Mika.
Thank you, and luckily, you know, Kim and Orlando did such a nice synthesis and thorough explanation of a lot of the curriculum, professional learning that has been going on, so that helps us to keep this presentation nice and brief. So, we'll be a good balance of each other tonight. So tonight I present to you an update on our professional learning plan. This is something that in the past had been an annual Board of Ed approval. However, last year, Board of Education approved a 3-year plan of professional learning, which is something that we created as part of our larger strategic plan, and using a lot of data that came from that strategic plan work, and obviously more of our recent data as well. So, as I mentioned, we have obviously our professional learning plan, but we have a committee that comes together typically twice a year. It's a subset of our District Curriculum Council, or DCC. As I mentioned, last year we created a 3-year professional learning plan, so that's why it's an update for you tonight on how that plan is going. And this year, one of the things that we did differently was to also extend an invitation to Teaching Learning Center policy board members, because of that tight connection of professional learning, obviously between the district and the work that goes on at the TLC. So we met twice this year to review our progress of year 1 and use the data from that to help to start envision what our professional learning for year 2 will look like in alignment to our plan. Another new thing that we added this year was every year we send a TLC needs assessment around professional learning to our staff. We added a section this year specifically on contractual meetings, and by that I mean the meetings that we hold in district that are professional learning, and they're contractual because they are part of our teacher contract, that on Mondays between 3:30 and 4:30, we engage in faculty, department, and grade level meetings which center around professional learning. And so that was a great addition, and then we also ensured that teachers and staff received time during like a faculty meeting, or we cut faculty meetings 10 minutes short so that they could do it asynchronously at a time of their leisure. And so we had a really good solid, it was almost, it's nearly 300 of our staff, which is much higher than typical, so it's not all still, but a much higher number of our staff than typical who responded. And from this, we were able to analyze our progress of the professional learning plan, year 1, and then also draft some professional learning for next year, which I'll share at the end. And so what we noted, and you have the plan in your in board docs for you to review, and it provides some more specifics around the completed items. First off, it was a great experience to go through because as you're going through the year, you have so many things that you're doing. I mean, you saw just the amazing work that Kim and Orlando juggle on a daily basis. And so sometimes the day-to-day, you feel like, geez, are we getting enough done? Are we doing what we need to? And going through this as a team, which is a K-12 stakeholder group, including parents and guardians, where we go through and we say, like, what were we able to accomplish for our professional learning? It felt really good to see how much we've really done and that we really pretty much completed what we intended to in that first year of the plan. So some of the areas that were addressed through professional learning this year, you just heard a lot of our curriculum, which is obviously tightly tied to our professional learning. So I will kind of go through that one quickly. As far as instruction, continuing to dive into our instructional model, there's professional learning specifically on small group instruction and how that is different, more targeted, specific than some whole group instruction that you might engage in. We started to look at and be introduced in certain groups to the computer science and digital fluency standards, and of course, continued a lot of our culturally responsive professional learning through Dr. Hunter, but also district-wide professional learning and cognitive redlining. Implementation systems, a lot of different pieces that we engaged in professional learning on. Functional behaviors and function-based thinking. This is something that we did at our leadership retreat and then was also turnkey to various departments as appropriate, just how do we help to support students with some of those different behavioral needs that we're currently seeing. A lot of work through our K-6, 7, 12, and then K-12 leadership meetings around the IST and PST processes, and this year we brought into those leadership meetings SES staff members, intervention teachers, some classroom teachers that would help us to look at our IST, PST, so our problem-solving teams, look at our processes and how we might revise our guidelines around those. So that is ongoing and will continue next year. Our student services department really focused highly on IEP writing. This was a big piece from our student services analysis, also through our strategic planning process, something that was identified. And Amy and Joanna really dedicated the bulk of their department meetings this year to IEP writing and having that more consistent across K through 12. I will mention Panorama because you've heard that before and some of the professional learning we've had there. And I did want to, this is the one that I wanted to go a little bit more specifically into, which was onboarding. So it's under implementation systems in the plan, but there really was so many different pieces and people within this room who really played a large role in that to better onboard our staff, so, and the professional learning that goes with that. So, for example, one of the things was how do we create professional learning staff for staff who enter at the beginning, but also mid-year. So our data and tech teams, shout out to Howard, did a really nice job of creating some new systems procedures to support newly hired staff across all staffing areas. Our HR office, so Michelle and her team worked to create onboarding orientation modules for clerical and maintenance and operations staff. The TLC provided a TA-specific professional learning series specifically for our teachers' assistants. And one area that we wanted to continue that we had discussed when we put this plan together was to create an asynchronous module for our teaching staff that's hired mid-year of our new teacher orientation. And that was something that we just weren't able to get to with our TLC director going on maternity leave. And so we will be able to address that when she returns this summer. So we're really excited about that. In addition to that, there's the new administrator series on supervision and evaluation on APPR, which Michelle holds. Monthly meetings with assistant superintendents and superintendent with our leadership staff, outside leadership coaches and principals in year 2 receiving a leadership liaison. And then for our teacher leaders, we're also identified to support through this plan. This year we instituted, with myself and our directors of instruction, monthly professional learning for lead teachers. So this was where the lead teachers actually engaged in professional learning that they could then turnkey back to the buildings, which really was helping with consistency and expectations and clarity. I also engaged in quarterly meetings with lead teachers and myself. Contact teachers meet monthly with our directors of instruction. And as many of you know, last year we invited, and we'll do so again this year, to our summer leadership curriculum instruction workshop, we made sure to include all of our teacher leaders, so that invite will be extended to them again. So it was just, that was one of the areas where you kind of do that in bits and parts, and when you look at it holistically, it was really something that I feel like our district should really be proud of. And so, along with that, then of course, still addressing certain areas through well-being of self and community, such as restorative practices, a lot of TCI training that has continued, and our work around our SEL curriculum, including our SEL survey that went up this year for the first time. As we look ahead to next year, some of the areas of focus that are outlined within the plan are continued work on Panorama, so how are we bringing that to everyone, all staff, and tied to that, continued use of our DataWise process and that refocus on how do we use data to drive instruction, or where we really want to, forgot what I was going to say. Next bullet. We're going to continue to look at the computer science and digital fluency standards. Through our instructional model work, we'll continue that focus, but particularly on differentiation, which is one of those words that appears kind of around our entire instructional model, and what does that look like and mean. We'll continue to look at IST, PST, and our work on standards-based grading, but a particular focus, and you'll hear a lot about this next year, on the calibration and curricular alignment when we're talking about standards-based grading. I think there's often an overemphasis on the end product of grading. Like, is it gonna be a 1, 2, 3? Is it gonna be a rubric score? Is it gonna be a percentage score? And we're gonna kind of refocus on what do those grades mean and how do teachers end up with particular grades, and how do we calibrate that so that it is consistent if you're teaching the same grade level or the same content area. Again, a little sneak peek ahead. So at the professional, through this plan and through the work of the committee, we're able to identify for October 11th, 2024, some of the main areas in which we want to focus that professional learning. So we're feeling really excited to already have an idea of what will happen on that day. And then we also started to map out our grade level and department meetings based on all of the feedback we collected through that needs assessment. So we're looking at a mix of synchronous and asynchronous professional learning, so really moving the way we're delivering that into the times that we're in now. And there was also teachers and staff shared that they just really need that time to engage with their curriculum, talk about it with other staff, how is it going and what does that look like, and the ability to collaborate with one another. So those will be our emphasis for next year. And again, you have the entire plan to review. Again, you don't need to provide approval since it was given last year, but if you have any questions and comments, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Mrs. Media. Any questions, comments? All right, thank you very much for the update. That brings us to personnel. May I have the recommended resolution?
Be it resolved that the personnel agenda dated May 30th, 2024, as recommended by the superintendent of schools, be approved as presented.
May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mrs. Bornwell. May I have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Dr. Johnson?
Yes, Ms. Kramer.
Thank you. So tonight for your approval, we have resignations of certified staff of an assistant director for counseling, student equity, and wellness, 2 English teachers, 3 teaching assistants, 2 elementary teachers, a school counselor, social studies teacher, and secondary principal. We have resignations of classified staff of a teacher aide and a licensed professional nurse. Change in employment status, we have a laborer who has a revised start date, a food service helper with change in hours, a custodian that's a temporary status or original status, and a long-term sub tutor teacher to lead tutor. We have the appointments for certified staff, an elementary principal, a technology teacher, and a teaching assistant. Classified staff of 2 cleaners and secretary to the assistant principals, and some per diem staff members of 4 long-term substitute ones, a monitor, Eagles Care lead teacher, 2 contract substitutes, and 2 food service helpers, as well as a varsity wrestling coach. And then we have recommendations for appointment for contact teacher stipends for the 24-25 school year of K-6 counseling contact, world language 7-8, social studies 7-8, English 9-12, science 9-12, and skills coach. We also have appointments of 2 teachers moving to teachers of special assignment for the math teacher K-12 to K-12 STEAM and an English teacher to K-12 humanities. And then the recommendation for permanent civil service appointment for cleaner and cook manager. We have 1 teacher assistant unpaid leave. And then 2 notices of termination for long-term substitutes of 5 at the LTS 1 that conclude at the end of this school year, and 1 LTS 2 that is a part-time status to conclude at the end of this year. And then notice of termination of 11 of our substitutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer, for keeping busy as always. Any questions or comments on the personnel agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? That is 7-0, Ms. Lester. That brings us to new business, item number 1, bond resolution. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
The full resolution can be found in Board Docs.
Are you sure?
Yes.
The full resolution is 1,298 words. I ran it through Microsoft word count. May I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Bay, seconded by Ms. Vargas Cronin. Dr. Johnson.
Mr. Brennan, anything to add about this?
No, I mean, this is the next step, as Dr. Johnson mentioned during his superintendent's update. The public approved our maintenance capital project at Brookfield Elementary School. And as the voters considered, it's a zero tax impact. But we are going to be using some capital reserve money. We're also going to be borrowing money, which will be offset by building aid. And this bond resolution will allow us to engage in that borrowing process.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Any questions or comments on that? Did you have a question? Okay, I just saw your hand move. All right, all those in favor? 7-0. That brings us to the consent agenda. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the West Arundequoit Central School District approves the consent agenda, which includes K2 through K5.
May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Bay, seconded by Mrs. Bornabal. Tonight's consent agenda includes recommendations of the Committee on Special Education, approval of revised vote personnel, surplus classroom furniture, and policy approval of policy 6190. Are there any items on the consent agenda which a board member would like removed for a separate discussion? Any items on the consent agenda which a board member would like removed to be voted on separately? Any questions or comments on the consent agenda as a whole? All right, all those in favor? That is 7-0. That brings us to liaison reports. The first section is Monroe County School Boards Association. There were not any Monroe County School Boards Association standing committee meetings in May, but I do want to highlight that last night was the annual meeting of the association, and it is traditional that the president of the association's district provide the musical entertainment for that event, and I just want to say that our students crushed it. The highlight of the evening was the Rogers Drum Ensemble, which had literally everyone in the room moving and grooving. So special thanks to Ms. Welch, Ms. Potter, and Mrs. Conti and all the rest of the music department and our students for putting all that together. They also had Monroe County School Board's temporary tattoos, which I have not been able to get off. So very high quality. They made a very large one for me specifically that I have yet to apply to my body.
I can chime in real quick. I think Mr. Metris left some key pieces of the annual meeting off of his summary. Part of the annual meeting is the election of new Monroe County School Boards Association officers, but before they can do that, they say thank you to those that currently sit in the role. Mr. Metris was the Monroe County School Boards Association president for the last school year. You have been an incredible advocate for our district, a leader for the organization. you've established relationships with government officials that the School Boards Association or our school has never had before. I think you have helped us as a district, but I think based on a lot of the kind words that were said yesterday, it was very clear the impact that you've had on many other districts in the association as a whole. So maybe it's fitting that that tattoo doesn't come off, because you had a very long-lasting impact on the Monroe County School Boards Association, and hopefully that tattoo has a long-lasting impact on you as well. So thank you for all of your hard work. We know it wasn't easy, very time-consuming, but your passion has really helped advance the cause of our students in our school district.
Thank you, Matt. And now, before I channel my own Mrs. Cunningham, we'll move on to the next section here. Mrs. Cunningham was our designated board crier. And a reminder, next is community and school groups, Helmer Nature Center with Mr. Connor and Mr. Bay.
We met on the 14th, and we announced the winners of the Environmental Award and the Dallas Book Award, which were also awarded on Tuesday at the awards ceremony. We talked about the Maple Weekend as well as the Eclipse events, the successes of those, and went on a nature walk and discussed the plans for the 50th anniversary celebration.
So part of the 50th celebration is they're going to do, they have some special rocks that they're going to do like a scavenger hunt, where if you find a rock, there's a QR code on it, you can scan it, and those go in, so that's kind of exciting. With that, and also we talked about there's going to be some work done on the forebay of the pond area this year to remove about 175 cubic yards to, it's kind of going back in a little bit, you know, it's doing its job, it's collecting that silt, and so they, every once in a while, they like to clean that out to make sure that it's providing the protection to the rest of the waterway down. They had an Eagle Scout project that planted some new plants in the nursery, and continued work on those, some of the invasive species of plant and vines that have come up over the years down there with the additional staff. They've been really able to clear those out and really bring out some of the trees the vines were climbing on, so it's really nice. And if you get a chance to get down there towards the northeast section, last year they planted a whole bunch of wildflower seeds and they started to sprout. So between now and July, they will sprout through the whole season, but I think that's going to be the big push will be there before 4th of July and everything. So a lot of great work going on down there. And you know, we talked about the eclipse. It was, while it wasn't the event we wanted it to be, there was a lot of people that showed up, and it was a big success. So.
Absolutely, we saw in that cartoon drawing, it was still pretty cool. Thank you, both of you. Next is PTSA with Mrs. Porter and Mrs. Bornwall.
We last met on May 14th, where they announced or shared that there will be a Red Wings game this coming Sunday at 1:05 for people to attend. I'm going to be there rooting for the Red Wings. And then there was a Title I presentation that Mrs. Miga gave about how and what it means to be a Title I school and the schools in our district that qualify for that. And there was a lot of collaboration about how the PTSA can help get the word out and support having parents fill out the forms that need to be filled out and kind of working together on that. And that's all.
Excellent, thank you. Next is West Arundequoit Foundation with Mr. Connor and Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, we met on the 13th. That one was the one over Zoom, which was kind of nice. Continue to review and edit the operation manual. We listed all the grant proposals. We also spoke with the coordinators for the DAG DC trip to see if there's ways that WIF can help kind of provide some funding. And we set up the first annual Alumni Bash, which is going to be November 30th. And we locked in a cornhole tournament date for September 27th.
Excellent, thank you. I heard Mr. Amaranto is going to participate in that this year. Just tell me before the meeting. Next is Teacher Learning Center. Ms. Bohr, Mr. Sullivan.
The last meeting was the 23rd. Unfortunately, Mrs. Bohr and myself both had work meetings at the exact same time in the TLC, so we were unable to attend.
Facilities with myself and Ms. Vargas Cronin. I was not able to attend. Were
I
you?
think we had the same issue. It was on the 23rd and we weren't able to attend as well.
I did steal the agenda out of our Teams folder, and we discussed the RISE project, which Dr. Johnson already updated us on, the capital improvement project at Brookview, and the 5-year plan, which will be on next week's board agenda, so I got a preview of that already. Master planning. James, anything you want to add on that? Looks like we're adding some consultants this year.
Yeah, so kind of, as we kind of transition from capital 5-year BCS plans to our master plan, CPL, our architects, have enlisted additional consultants, specialists. One was, just we looked at a couple pieces of that, one tied to audio visual in our auditorium, the other one was a focus on our kitchens and serving areas. And so we kind of reviewed some of those reports just to give a flavor to the committee of what some of these, inclusion of these specialized documents in the master plan will look like.
Excellent. And then you took a field trip to Seneca to look at the capital outlay exclusion project work?
Yeah, to see the work that was completed, nearing completion for this year's project, and then talk about the sprinkler heads replacements for next year in the capital outlay exclusion project for 24-25.
Excellent. Anything else you wanted to add on facilities that I didn't cover from what I stole off of your PowerPoint?
That's what it's there for.
Thank you very much. Next is health and safety with Mrs. Ball and Ms. Vargas.
Health and safety did not have a meeting in May. We were scheduled on the day of our district vote, so it has been postponed to the 11th, I believe, of June.
That brings us to buildings. First is Aronic High School. Did they leave you anything this time?
No, they didn't. It's easy to be the liaison. But, you know, they did their, school community event fest there, and it was very well attended. Some students that I spoke to outside of that, highly enjoyed it. They enjoyed the time together. I know some of the senior class have some activities coming up, but they too also enjoy just that time to be together, and where they can be themselves and be with their friends, Yeah, so great work by our staff over there, and we keep a high tradition going.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Bay. Date with Ms. Park.
We had a few Dake student athletes who attended attended the Section 5 Leadership Summit at the Rotary Sunshine Camp. The students really enjoyed that time there and learned a lot. And the Dakes Award ceremony was held a couple of weeks ago. Awards were given for academics, community values, Odyssey of the Mind, citizenship, service, athletics, and all-county music. And it was a great night for the students and families of Dake.
Excellent, thank you. Rogers, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, lots of exciting things going on at Rogers. They had an awesome celebration of students at their open house. Over 300 families came to see student work on display. They were excited to have a number of community partners there also that shared a variety of different opportunities that the students could take part in over the summer. They have shared the renderings of the playground and library renovations with members of our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classes, as well as the staff. A lot of excitement around that as they begin to look forward to those projects. Evan Dumais and the special education teachers brought students to the Special Olympics track and field day. Students really raved about the experience and had a lot of fun. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, Rogers' esteemed drum ensemble took center stage at Monroe County School Boards Association. The students loved the experience. The members of the School Boards Association absolutely loved it, and it culminated with an amazing incredibly long-standing relation. So big congrats to our students that participated in that.
And I heard Mr. DiMartino made them all dinner.
I heard
Yeah,
that too.
before they went,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I heard.
We did.
That's
That is
amazing.
so nice.
And what Mrs. Conte said before too, I think really gave meaning to all that they do, and hearing them is amazing, but really understanding how they do it really elevates that whole experience for all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah, we've set a high bar for next year.
Yes. For sure.
Next is Iroquois with Mrs. Bornfeld.
I do not have a May update for Iroquois. Looks like April was sent. So, I'm sure lots is going on over with our friends at Iroquois.
I can tell you it's good.
It's good.
Yeah. The kids report that it is all well.
Next is Briarwood Colebrook with Ms. Vargas.
Yeah, so, yesterday kicked off Sports Day celebrations at Colebrook. They had an Olympic theme. I had a chance to go to Briarwood today for their Sports Day. It was a perfect day for it. And it was so much fun, just seeing a lot of old games that I remember and a lot of new games to be played. And they had ice cream at the end of the afternoon, so that was nice. Sponsored by PTSA. They're wrapping up the year with assessments, celebrations, and even dance-offs in the music classes. That sounds fun. Students, faculty, and staff are having fun and enjoying the last days of the school year. They're looking forward to third grade graduations and kindergarten moving up in June.
Excellent, thank you. Brookview Seneca, Mr. Connor.
Yeah, they're gearing up for the end of the year events at both schools. Sports Day and Flag Day are around the corner. And it's been an amazing year, and they're looking forward to closing it out with their wonderful families.
Excellent. And then finally, Listwood at South Lawn with myself. I got an update from Mrs. Pavone. It's such a busy time of year and so much is going on. Listwood and South Lawn will be having their carnivals this weekend. It has been exciting to see the data as students are finishing testing. The growth is phenomenal. We have so many fun field trips and activities coming up later in this last month of school. One thing that really is exciting, Listwood students advocated for an additional bike rack. It's great to see them advocating for what they need. And Ms. Pavone also highlighted it was wonderful to have the Board of Education student representatives come interview these students at South Lawn. They had a wonderful time. And then lastly, a few weeks ago, I was able to do a building visit at Listwood. It's great to see all the students get in all the classrooms. That was where my son went a few years ago, so a lot of nostalgia there too. But it was also good to just be able to pop into our in-district UPK program. When I popped in there, they were covering respect and getting ready to treat each other with respect in kindergarten. So very exciting stuff going on there. And that brings us to future meetings. Will we have some?
Yes, we have audit committee next Thursday at 6, followed by the public hearing on our safety plan and our regular meeting at 7 o'clock. That'll be here at district office, and then we have a business meeting Thursday, June 20th at 7 p.m. here at district office.
Thank you, Mrs. Lustig. That brings us to executive session. Is there a reason to go into executive session tonight?
Yes, there is, to discuss the employment history of a particular person or persons.
May I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Cornwell. Seconded by Mr. Sullivan. All those in favor? And 7-0, we will take a short recess and reconvene in executive session. Thank you, everyone, for a very productive meeting.